I, 26F, need to get this off my chest because my whole world just turned upside down. I've been with Jake, 28M, for 3 years and I thought I knew everything about him. We met at a work conference in Chicago where my company was showcasing new software. I worked in marketing and was manning our booth when Jake came up asking questions about our products. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in what I was saying. We ended up talking long after my presentation was over. During that first conversation, Jake told me about losing his parents in a tragic car accident when he was 14. He described how he went to live with his aunt in Minnesota after that, and how she helped him cope with the loss. He talked about putting himself through college by working 2 jobs and eventually landing a position in IT security. I was impressed by his resilience and how he built a successful life despite such a difficult start. We exchanged numbers and started dating soon after. Jake was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. He was attentive, supportive, and always seemed to know exactly what to say when I was stressed or upset. He told me he had no siblings and wasn't close to his extended family because they had abandoned him after his parents died. This made me protective of him, and I always made extra effort to include him in my family gatherings. After a year of dating, Jake moved in with me. Looking back, there were red flags I ignored because I was so in love. He was incredibly secretive about his phone and laptop, always keeping them locked and angled away from me. When I asked about it, he explained that working in IT security made him paranoid about privacy. It made sense given his profession, so I never pushed the issue. He proposed 6 months ago during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. He said he'd been saving for the ring for months and wanted to make it perfect. My family was overjoyed. They practically adopted Jake as one of their own. My dad, who's usually skeptical of my boyfriends, treated Jake like the son he never had. They would spend hours discussing technology and business ideas. Everything started unraveling last month. I was deep cleaning our apartment while Jake was at a work conference. We'd been talking about buying a house, so I was gathering documents we'd need for the mortgage application. While organizing the office, I found a birthday card tucked behind some books on the shelf. It was nothing fancy, just a simple Hallmark card with a nature scene on the front. When I opened it, my heart stopped. The card was addressed to Jake from his mother, dated just 2 weeks ago. The message inside was casual and loving, mentioning his sister Amy's upcoming wedding and how excited they were to see him there. She signed it Love, Mom and Dad, and included a gift card to his favorite restaurant. I sat on the floor staring at that card for what felt like hours. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. Jake's parents were supposed to be dead. He'd cried in my arms talking about losing them. We'd even visited a random cemetery once where he claimed they were buried, though now I realize we never actually went to any specific grave. When Jake came home that evening, I tried to act normal while I figured out how to confront him. But he must have noticed something was off because he kept asking if I was okay. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I got the card from where I'd left it and placed it on the kitchen counter in front of him. The look on his face, I'll never forget it. For a split second, there was pure panic before he tried to compose himself. He attempted to claim it was an old card at first, but I pointed out the recent date. Then he said it was from his aunt who he sometimes called Mom, but that didn't explain the mention of his sister's wedding. After an hour of circular conversations and obvious lies, he finally broke down and admitted the truth. His parents were alive and well, living just 3 hours away in Milwaukee. He had 2 sisters, and the wedding mentioned in the card was real. When I asked why he'd lied, he claimed his family was toxic and abusive, and he was trying to protect both himself and me from them. I might have believed him if I hadn't noticed how his behavior changed after that conversation. He started taking work calls in another room, speaking in hushed tones. His phone was never out of his sight, and he changed all his passwords. One night, he left his laptop open while taking a shower, something he'd never done before. A notification popped up from his email, and I saw his sister's name. I know I shouldn't have read it, but after discovering such a massive lie, I couldn't help myself. The email chain between Jake and his sister made me physically ill. Not only was his family not toxic, but they were actually worried about him. His sister Amy was begging him to stop lying and get help. She mentioned how he'd done this before, created elaborate fake backstories to manipulate women into relationships. She pleaded with him not to drag me into his mess and to tell me the truth before it was too late. That email led me down a rabbit hole. His sister mentioned his ex-wife Lauren, someone he'd never told me existed. Through some basic social media searching, I found her. My hands were shaking as I sent her a message explaining who I was. She responded almost immediately, warning me that Jake was a pathological liar who had told her the same story about being an orphan. When she discovered the truth, he'd cleaned out their joint account and disappeared. His family had helped her track him down and return the money. I packed enough clothes for a few days and went to stay with my sister. Jake has been calling and texting constantly, swearing he can explain everything. He claims he lied because he was ashamed of his past mistakes and wanted to be a better person for me. But how can I believe anything he says now? Every emotional moment we shared about his dead parents, every story about his struggles as an orphan, it was all calculated manipulation. My sister thinks I should meet with his family to get the full story, but I'm terrified of what else I might learn. I haven't told my parents yet because they'll be devastated. They've spent 3 years treating Jake like family, sharing holidays and personal moments with someone who is lying to all of us. As a precaution, I've already canceled our joint credit card and moved my savings to a new account. Jake's sister Amy found me on Facebook and wants to meet. She says there's more I need to know, things that could protect me from him. Part of me wants to just run away and never look back, but I feel like I need answers to make sense of the last 3 years of my life. I've been engaged to a complete stranger, and I don't know what to do next. Update 1: the past 2 weeks have been a complete nightmare. After my last post, I decided to meet with Jake's sister Sarah at a coffee shop about an hour from my apartment. I chose a public place because honestly, I wasn't sure if she was telling the truth either. After living with Jake's lies for so long, I found myself doubting everything. Sarah arrived early. I recognized her immediately from photos in Jake's emails, but seeing her in person was surreal. She looked so much like Jake that it physically hurt. She brought a large manila envelope with her, and as soon as we sat down, she started apologizing. "We should have tried harder to warn you," she said. "We've been through this so many times with Jake that sometimes it feels hopeless." What Sarah revealed over the next 2 hours made me physically sick. Jake wasn't just a liar, he was a serial con artist who had perfected his technique over years of practice. I was the 6th woman he'd pulled this scam on. His pattern was always the same: he would target successful, empathetic women, usually at professional conferences or industry events. He used the dead parents' story because he found it was the most effective way to gain sympathy and avoid questions about his background. Sarah pulled out police reports, court documents, and sworn statements from 5 other women. The earliest was from 2015, about a woman named Michelle who Jake met at a tech convention. He told her the same orphan story, moved in with her after a year, and then systematically drained her bank accounts while she was on a business trip. She came home to find their apartment empty and $47,000 missing. Then there was his ex-wife Rebecca, except she wasn't technically his ex-wife because they were still legally married. They had gotten married in 2017, and when she discovered his lies 6 months later, he disappeared before finalizing their divorce. This meant that not only was our entire relationship a lie, but our engagement was fraudulent. If we had gotten married, it would have been bigamy. The other cases followed a similar pattern. A woman named Jessica in 2019 lost her inheritance. Another named Rachel in 2020 had her identity stolen and credit ruined. The most recent before me was a woman named Ashley who Jake was actually dating simultaneously in another city. He maintained relationships with both of us by claiming he had frequent business trips. As Sarah was showing me the documentation, my phone started buzzing. Jake had somehow found out about our meeting. We think he might have been tracking Sarah's phone. He burst into the coffee shop, crying and making a scene. He tried to paint Sarah as the unstable one, claiming she was lying because she was jealous of his relationships. The way he switched between crying and anger was chilling. The cafe staff had to call security to remove him. That evening, my phone exploded with calls from unknown numbers. I finally answered one and found myself talking to Ashley, Jake's other current girlfriend. She was just as shocked as I was. Jake had been living with her part-time in Detroit, telling her he traveled for work. She only found out about me because Sarah reached out to her too. Ashley and I talked for hours, comparing stories. The similarities were eerie. Jake had told her his parents died in a boating accident when he was 12. He claimed his uncle raised him in Seattle. Different details, same basic story designed to prevent questions about his family. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to process everything. Then letters started arriving from credit card companies I'd never heard of. Jake had apparently been opening accounts in my name using personal information he gathered while living with me. I found applications for loans I never took out. He had even listed me as a cosigner on a car lease without my knowledge. My parents are devastated. My dad especially. He and Jake had developed a close relationship, bonding over their shared interest in technology. Finding out it was all manipulation hit him hard. They're helping me move to a new apartment since Jake still has keys to my current place and has shown up unannounced several times. I've filed a police report and am working with Jake's other victims to build a case against him. Sarah introduced me to a detective who's been tracking Jake's scams for years, but he's been hard to prosecute because he's careful to stay just within legal boundaries or manipulate his victims into acting willingly. Ashley and I have started documenting everything and sharing information with law enforcement. We discovered Jake has been using details from each relationship to make his next con more convincing. He took things I told him in confidence about my fears and insecurities and used them to manipulate Ashley. He did the same with stories and experiences from his previous victims. The hardest part is realizing that every intimate moment, every deep conversation, every time I thought we were connecting, it was all calculated. He studied each of us like targets, figuring out exactly what we needed to hear to trust him completely. Sarah showed me notebooks where he actually wrote down details about his victims' preferences, fears, and weaknesses. I'm working with a lawyer to protect myself financially and legally. We're trying to figure out exactly what Jake had access to while we lived together and what other accounts or documents he might have compromised. I've changed all my passwords, frozen my credit, and set up fraud alerts. But I'm terrified of what else might surface. The support from Jake's other victims has been overwhelming. We've created a group chat to share information and warn each other if he tries to contact any of us. It's horrifying but also comforting to know I'm not alone in this. These women understand exactly what I'm going through because they've lived it too. Sarah has been incredibly helpful, but I can see how much this hurts her too. She's spent years trying to stop her brother from destroying lives, only to watch him get better at hiding his tracks. Their parents are heartbroken, and Jake uses their pain to manipulate them whenever he needs money or support. I still haven't processed everything fully, but at least now I know the truth. There are still moments when I miss the Jake I thought I knew, before remembering that person never really existed. He was a character created specifically to trap me, just like he did with all the others. More updates to come as this situation continues to unfold. I have a feeling we're still just scratching the surface of Jake's deceptions. Update 2: Things have gotten significantly worse since my last update. After comparing notes with other victims and working with the detective, we've uncovered a whole network of deception that makes my head spin. Jake isn't just running simple romance scams, he's created an entire web of fake identities and elaborate cons. Rachel, one of his previous victims, reached out after seeing my last post. She revealed something that made my blood run cold. Before disappearing with her savings, Jake had convinced her to add his name to her house deed as a co-owner. He claimed it would make their future marriage more secure. She trusted him completely, just like I did. Now she's trapped in a legal battle trying to get her property back because technically, he's still a legal owner of her house. The worst part? She discovered 2 other women in the same situation in different states. The police got more interested when they realized Jake's scams crossed state lines. They found evidence that he's been selling personal information stolen from his victims on various dark web forums. All those times he was working late on his laptop, he was actually collecting and selling our data. His supposed IT security job was another lie. He actually worked remotely as a customer service representative for a small company, which gave him flexible hours to maintain his multiple lives. Sarah helped me get in touch with his first wife, Maria. Her story was the most disturbing yet. She caught Jake secretly filming their intimate moments without her consent. When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. Instead, he threatened to release the videos if she ever exposed his lies. Maria stayed quiet for years out of fear, but now she's working with a detective to press charges. Maria also revealed that Jake had used her professional connections to scam her coworkers. He would attend her office parties, charm her colleagues, and then convince them to invest in fake startups he claimed to be developing. Some people lost their entire retirement savings. This explained why Jake was always so eager to attend my work events. He was scouting for new victims. Jake's parents finally contacted me directly last week. They shared stories about his childhood that painted a clear pattern. He started small, lying about grades, forging sick notes for school. But at 16, he pulled off his first big con. He forged documents to get himself admitted to an elite private school, complete with fake recommendations and transcripts. When he got away with it, something changed in him. The thrill of successfully deceiving people became his addiction. His family tried getting him help multiple times. They paid for therapy, intervention specialists, even tried to have him committed once when his lies led to a suicide attempt by one of his victims. But Jake would always manipulate his way out, using their love and guilt against them. Now they're finally accepting that he won't change. Things escalated further when we discovered Jake had been running fake social media profiles using photos stolen from his cousin Tom. He created elaborate backstories for each profile, using them to run parallel romance scams online while maintaining his in-person cons. Tom was horrified to learn his images had been used to scam dozens of women out of money. The most recent development is almost too bizarre to believe. One of Jake's fake profiles was posing as a grief counselor. He joined online support groups for widows and widowers, targeting vulnerable people who had recently lost their spouses. He would build emotional connections over months, then convince them to invest their life insurance payouts in non-existent businesses. The detective estimates Jake has stolen over $500,000 through various scams over the past 5 years. He's meticulous about staying just within legal boundaries, making prosecution difficult. Most victims willingly gave him money or access to their accounts, making it hard to prove criminal intent. I've been going through our entire relationship in my head, realizing how calculated every moment was. All those times he was vulnerable with me, sharing tears about his dead parents? He practiced those stories countless times with other women. The thoughtful gifts he gave me? Probably bought with money stolen from previous victims. Even our proposal spot at Lake Michigan, Maria told me he used the exact same location and speech with her. Sarah found Jake's storage unit last week. Inside were boxes of mementos from his victims, photos, jewelry, personal items we thought he'd lost or misplaced. He kept detailed journals documenting each relationship, including notes about what manipulation tactics worked best. Reading my name in those journals, seeing how he strategically planned every aspect of our relationship. I've never felt so violated. The police are building a stronger case now that more victims are coming forward. But Jake seems to be one step ahead. He's already deleted most of his online traces and his current location is unknown. Maria thinks he's probably already setting up his next con somewhere else, using everything he learned from us to make his story even more convincing. I'll update again when there are new developments. Right now, I'm focused on helping other victims recover their property and working with lawyers to protect ourselves from whatever Jake might try next. Update 3: I never expected my final update would be about something this twisted. Jake was arrested last week, but not for any of the romance scams or identity theft we'd been tracking. The police caught him impersonating a doctor at Metropolitan General Hospital. He had somehow obtained fake credentials and was working in the psychiatric ward for over a month, accessing patient records and medication logs. The way he got caught was almost accidental. A real doctor who had seen his photo in a medical board warning bulletin about imposters recognized him during rounds. Jake had created an entire fake identity as Dr. James Wilson, complete with a fabricated medical degree from Johns Hopkins and forged residency records. He even wore a white coat with an embroidered name tag and carried a real stethoscope. When the police searched his new apartment and storage unit, they found dozens of stolen prescription pads, patient files, and medical equipment. He had been using hospital computers to continue running his online scams, taking advantage of the medical center's secure network. The investigators also discovered he'd been stealing medications from the pharmacy and selling them through dark web marketplaces. What makes this even more disturbing is that he was specifically working in the psychiatric ward, where patients are most vulnerable. The hospital is now reviewing all patient records from his time there to determine if he interfered with any treatments or prescriptions. Several families have already come forward with concerns about strange interactions with Dr. Wilson. I testified at his bail hearing along with Sarah, Maria, and 3 other victims. Jake showed no remorse throughout the proceedings. He actually smirked when the prosecutor read out the charges, like it was all some kind of game to him. The judge denied bail, citing his history of using multiple identities and crossing state lines to avoid detection. His family was in the courtroom too. His parents looked completely broken. They've finally accepted that Jake won't change and have decided to cut all contact. Sarah told me they're selling their house and moving to another state to escape the shame and constant reminders of what their son has done. The detective handling the case believes there are at least a dozen more victims who haven't come forward yet. They found evidence on Jake's devices suggesting he was running similar scams in several other states, using different identities and backstories. The FBI is now involved because of the interstate nature of his crimes and the medical fraud aspect. Sarah and I have started a support group for people affected by Jake's various cons. We meet virtually every week, sharing stories and helping each other heal. It's surprising how many different types of people fell for his lies: doctors, lawyers, teachers, even a retired police officer. His ability to adapt his persona to target different victims was incredible. I'm moving to Colorado next month for a fresh start. My company has an office there, and I need to get away from all the reminders of Jake in this city. Every restaurant, every park, every street corner holds memories that I now know were completely fake. The other women in the support group understand this need to escape. Most of them moved away too after discovering Jake's true nature. This experience has changed how I trust people, but I refuse to let it destroy my ability to form relationships. The women I've met through this ordeal have become close friends, and we're working together to prevent others from falling for similar scams. We've created a website documenting Jake's various aliases and schemes, hoping to warn potential future victims. Sometimes I still can't believe how thoroughly Jake deceived all of us. But watching him in court, seeing the cold calculation behind his eyes, I finally understood that the man I loved never existed. He was just another one of Jake's carefully crafted characters, designed to exploit people's trust and compassion. The prosecutors say Jake could face up to 30 years in prison for the medical fraud alone, not counting any additional charges from his other scams. It's a small comfort knowing he won't be able to hurt anyone else for a long time, but the damage he's already done will take years to heal. I'm ready to close this chapter of my life and focus on rebuilding. The support group continues to grow as more victims come forward, and helping others has become an important part of my own healing process. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to unexpected connections and strength we never knew we had.